Hey all, and welcome to Skeptic Hangout, the place where we sit back, relax, and chit chat about intriguing and sometimes controversial topics through the lens of skepticism. With us today is Richard Gilliver from the Skeptic Takeout, Laura McGee from Unapologetically Me, and we have with us today our special guest, Rudy Bee. Today's topic is Jehovah's Witnesses. So grab your English tea or your cafe Americano and join us as we unpack who the Jehovah's Witnesses are and exactly what it is that they're witnessing. This is episode 23, Jehovah's Witnesses. Hey guys, how you guys doing today?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Hot.
Richard's nodding, just hot.
It's been really hot here. I mean, for you, it's been cold. It's like being 50 degrees, so it's like probably freezing for you. But for us, who are kind of normally blue or white, it's just kind of too hot. Everybody's melting and complaining all the time.
Oh no. Yeah, it has been hot here too, and we've had wildfires everywhere, so it's been crazy.
Yeah, how are you? Is the community safe? Has there been a lot affected by that?
Oh yeah, it's been really bad. So there's three different main communities within my area that have been affected by three different fires, and all areas where either I have family members or friends have family members.
Oh, goodness.
So yeah, one that was creeping towards us ended up creeping toward my mother-in-law, and she's now had to evacuate. Um, and it's really close to her house now, so we're a little bit worried. But all of that aside, everything is well otherwise. And I'm really excited to have with us today Rudy Bee. So, Rudy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, I am Rudy Bee. My pronouns, which are on display on the green screen thing behind me, are they, them. I am a ex-Jehovah's Witness, atheist activist. I had a channel of my own. I still have it, but I haven't really uploaded it to it much very recently. I've mostly been just working with the ACA as a new host of Talk Heathen. I haven't been on the show in a little bit, but I'll hopefully be on it again by sometime in August.
That's awesome. And you've done a lot of ACA shows, haven't you? Because I know you've done the nonprofits and Talk Heathen. Have you done, and you've done secular sexuality as well, right?
Mm-hmm. I've hosted a few episodes of secular sexuality. I've been on, at this point, every show but the Atheist Experience, I think.
So that's coming up. That's next.
Every show that's actively running, except for the Atheist Experience.
That is awesome. And it's always
some checklist.
Yeah, bucket list, Atheist Experience. That is really cool. So now I'm very, very pleased to have you on our meager new little podcast show. Like that means a lot to us. So, Richard, because I know that Rudy will have a lot to say about Jehovah's Witnesses, let's actually start with you. And what do you know about them?
I know not that much about them. I'm just preface by saying I'm so excited to have Rudy on, because when I did my recent show on cults, I actually reached out to Rudy, and they were so kind and let me use one of their videos in that. And
nice.
Just after that was released, I also phoned Talk Heathen to talk to them.
Like live on the show?
Further, yeah, live on the show.
Oh, that's awesome.
Further insight. I'm so excited to have Rudy here. So yeah, I know.
Yeah, you called in when I was hosting with Lloyd Evans, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. That was a great insight to have such great voices on the subject. But I'm more familiar with the Mormons because my wife was a Mormon for a little while. So what I know about the Jehovah's Witnesses is kind of through learning about the Mormons and knowing that they're quite similar in the kind of cult statuses. So I don't really know anything about the teachings. I don't know any other than I upset a girl who I quite liked at school because I asked her if she wanted a Christmas card. And she ran away in tears and never talked to me again.
Oh no.
Oof, that's not fun.
So that's pretty much
Well,
it. I'm a complete ignorant, so I'm so excited to kind of learn about it.
so what's cool about this conversation is I'm pretty much in the same boat. So I'm hoping that it won't end up being like an interrogation or like an interview, but we end up having a conversation. But I'm pretty much the same way. I have a lot of like the stereotypical thoughts of Jehovah's Witnesses. Like I think, and I could be getting them mixed up with another branch of Christianity, but there's the ones that don't allow blood transfusions and different like inoculations and medicines and stuff. And also what I think I know about them, again, could be wrong, is are they the ones that focus on like just the words of Jesus, where it's like the red letter Bible?
No, I'm not sure
okay.
which branch that is, but yeah, there's a lot
Okay.
of there's only a handful of different denominations that are known for preaching and stuff like that, but those ones that are known for that kind of get confused between the two of them, because it's like I see a well-dressed person at my door that wants to talk to me about the Bible. They could be Mormon, they could be Jehovah's Witnesses, they could be something else entirely. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty common. But as far as the first couple of things you've brought up, it is true that Jehovah's Witnesses don't get blood transfusions. It's a doctrine of theirs. But they do accept other types of medical care. That's
cool.
a common misconception. They are exclusively anti-blood transfusions. They're not anti-medicine in general. And that was actually something I had to deal with when I was a kid in school, was like, I remember a teacher kind of put me on the spot to explain why Jehovah's Witnesses don't accept blood transfusions and also other medical stuff. Like, oh yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in medicine. Rudy, you're a Jehovah's Witness. Why don't you stand up
put
and
you on the
explain to the
spot.
class?
Oh no.
And I was like, you know, one of the main sort of core things about being a Jehovah's Witness is preaching all the time, anytime. You are giving a witness by being this wholesome Christian person all the time and by spreading the good word or whatever. So I couldn't say no.
It was like
but
a
I
golden
also,
opportunity, huh?
yeah, but I also just wasn't prepared
Yeah.
whatsoever. Teacher did not give me a heads up that that was going to happen. And I actually, like, I got so anxious about it that I actually went to her after class and was like, can I have another shot at this tomorrow? Because, like,
because I thought of a bunch more stuff I could say.
Yeah, like, I could feel like I could explain this a lot better if I was actually prepared to explain it.
Yeah.
And she felt kind of bad for putting me on the spot, so she let me. And understandably, a lot of, well, not a lot of, but a few of the kids in class were verbally like, hey, that's kind of fucked up. Like, what if you were in a car accident and you were pregnant with 8 babies? And like, what would you get a blood transfusion then? And I was like, nope.
I don't know. Yeah.
No, I said no. I mean,
you said
I
no.
didn't
Yeah.
know. I didn't know, but I said no.
You said no. Yeah.
And they were just like, that's messed up. And I'm like,
what was the reaction from kids at school when did you go in, and as soon as you entered school, did they all know you were a Jehovah's Witness straight away? And how did they react to you once they knew?
Well, to clarify, I was homeschooled until my last 2 years of high school. So those were the only ones that I even went to public school for. And there were other Jehovah's Witness kids who were at my school and even in my grade, but we didn't have the same classes. So it wasn't like everybody was totally unaware, and I wasn't shy about telling people that I was a Jehovah's Witness. Most of the time, people didn't really care unless it became a big deal for whatever reason. Like if we were specifically talking about something related to something I wasn't allowed to do because I was a Jehovah's Witness, then it mattered. But otherwise, it was just like, yes, the Jesus freak kid. Every class has one. It was just like, yep, there's like, I felt like I was good at representing Jehovah's Witnesses in the sense that I was an honest person, an honest student. I wasn't a backstabber or a liar. People generally could rely on me. But I also couldn't become close friends with anybody because they were all worldly kids, and I was a Jehovah's Witness kid, and I had to have good spiritual uplifting association. And by definition, none of them are that, because none of them can encourage me to be a better Jehovah's Witness because they're not Jehovah's Witnesses themselves.
So in your day-to-day school life, were you, I don't know quite how to ask this question, but were you aware of your identity as a Jehovah's Witness? Did you go through each day thinking, I'm different because I'm a Jehovah's Witness? Or did you just was it just a normal school day that you didn't really think about it much unless it came up?
Well, the thing is, as a Jehovah's Witness, you kind of are always thinking about it to some degree.
Right.
You are always thinking about how you're being perceived and how you're being perceived by the angels and by Jehovah himself looking upon you. So it was like, it's like yes and no. I wasn't consciously thinking about it in everything I did, but it's pretty much always in the back of my mind for every interaction that I have, for everything that I do and say. But so I wasn't consciously thinking of it all the time, but it was always still kind of there. It's how I had always made my decisions. It was how I always lived my life. So it was unconscious but ever present, basically.
I like that answer. I think that's really relevant to, I think, a lot of people's religious experiences. So I would ask you, because I became religious as a young adult, and I went through it through my young adult years, and then I came out of it around 35. But I wasn't religious as a child. So my thought process or feeling was, yeah, it was ever present, but I was also really proud. Like I was like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing. And yeah, I'm like racking up points with God. And yeah, I'm making good decisions, but it was like sort of constantly positively reinforced in my own head. Is that how you felt as a child, or was there any negativity involved? Or
there was a lot of negativity involved, because very often I didn't feel like I was meeting those standards of how to be a good Jehovah's Witness, how to be a good Christian, and it just got worse and worse as I became a teenager. There's a lot of reading involved in being an active Jehovah's Witness, like kind of an absurd amount of reading. Wow. You have to constantly, like they have like 2 or 3 meetings a week at the Kingdom Hall, which is like church service. They have a couple of meetings a week, but even when you're not there, you're supposed to be reading the Bible every day. You're supposed to be studying various magazines, pamphlets, books that is put out by the organization. You're supposed to be self-indoctrinating all the time and actively indoctrinating others. Even when they're not giving it to you, you should be feeding it to yourself. So I always sort of, but I have ADHD. When I was a kid, I was big on reading, but I was big on reading fiction.
Right.
I wasn't, and even now I like fiction, but I have to listen on audiobook. I just don't have the attention span to sit down and read, even if it's something that I like.
Oh yeah, or even the time these days.
Because myself and Laura kind of grew up on, we've found out over the course of the months that we've been talking, that we kind of grew up on the same set of fantasy novels.
Yes.
Which I was probably reading before Laura, and probably before Rudy was born, because I am that old. So what was were you allowed to read kind of fantasy and fiction and things like that didn't align with the message of the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Oh, I was allowed to read secular literature. Yeah. And my parents were always very big on literature. My parents are both intelligent, at least somewhat educated people. My mother made it a point to bring me and my siblings to the library on a regular basis. She would read to us before bed at night. My dad didn't read to us as often. Usually he would read to us. If he did read to us, it would be like Shel Silverstein poems, not like a story, but like
something shorter and a little more engaging.
But both of my parents were always invested in us being well-read and articulate, me and my siblings, which is interesting for Jehovah's Witness parents, but I'll get into that later. But there were certain things, of course, that I was not allowed to read or watch. Harry Potter, Twilight, all the
more spiritual, magical type stuff.
Yes, exactly. But at the same time, there were a lot of things that it was always impressed upon us that we had to be making the right decisions. It wasn't just a matter of this is what you can and cannot read. We also had to be self-regulating. And I remember there was a fantasy book that I read as maybe like a pre-adolescent that I really liked. And the second time I read it, I realized that like it had some pretty sort of dark magic, like blood magic type stuff in it. And since I had been working on my spirituality, it made me uncomfortable. And even though I liked the story, it was like, I shouldn't be reading this. Not I don't want to read it, but I shouldn't be.
You know what? You bring up a couple of really, really good points. So I'm just gonna jump in and like touch on them before we get too far, because otherwise I'm gonna lose them all. But the first one is the misconception that just because you're in a religion, especially one that might be identified as either a cult or as more fundamentalist, there are still a lot of teachings either within subgroups or within the religion itself to go get educated. And like when I was a Muslim, it was the same thing. Like you're taught as the Western culture that Muslim women are not educated and have to stay home and have all these like really traditional roles. And in some countries that is the case. But with more westernized Muslim women and with all Muslim men, there's a very, very, very strong push toward knowledge and education. And getting out into the secular world and knowing science and history and what's going on and politics and understanding all the different cultural stuff. So like you said, there were some restrictions like, hey, like smut or certain like levels of violence and stuff, maybe stay away from those. But there was also like a really strong focus on, hey, one way of growing closer to God is through being intelligent and knowing what you're doing. And it makes you more articulate. It makes your faith stronger. Like God wants that for you. So it's interesting because a lot of people on the outside of all these different religions are like, oh, you're all ignorant. You're all uneducated. You're all like blocking out the outside world and all this secular information. And so it's interesting that you had such a similar experience to me. Because both of ours, even though Islam and Jehovah's Witnesses are so different, they're both considered very like similar in how they're viewed in Western culture.
Yeah, I will say there's definitely, well, my parents cared about education. I should make that clear. That's certainly not the case for all Jehovah's Witness parents.
True.
One of the core tenets that sort of guides Jehovah's Witnesses through their lives is that they are 100% sure that the world is going to end within the next 5 to 10 years. I was told, my parents were told, and my grandparents were told, you're not going to graduate high school before Armageddon comes.
Right.
And they don't see the irony in that, of course.
And kids today are still being told that.
3 generations, but you know.
Whatever.
So they don't put much stock in higher education at all. In fact, they discourage it, a lot of them. I mean, if you want to go to trade school for 2 years, learn a trade you can make decent money off of, and then get out of school, excellent, absolutely. But because they really don't want you to do much more out of high school than that. That's and that's actually something that comes from the top down. Like that's not even a Jehovah's Witness parent idea. It's
taught from the organization.
Yeah, it's taught from the organization that discouraging higher education, not only because, oh well, you're planning on being in school for 8 years, you think this world's going to be around for another 8 years? Think again. But on top of that, they have these ideas of like, oh, what are you going to go there for? To get money? What do you need money for? We're God's people. We live simply.
So it's more being godly over being worldly, is what it sounds like to me.
Yes. And of course, worldly influences. I mean, people having experiences with drugs and sex in college is like kind of the standard. So that's definitely discouraged. And
For sure.
I think, though, that besides all of those points, the additional point of learning critical thinking skills that you don't really learn in high school,
Yeah, can really
is
threaten
something
your
that,
faith. Yeah.
is something that
Yeah.
can be very threatening to them. And that's not something that they say is a reason, really, that they discourage people going to college, but
it's kind of their underlying.
yeah.
Is there any like discrepancy in how they present this to men versus women? Or I mean, like, is there any sort of gender disparity at all in higher education and getting jobs and stuff like that?
Not really in higher education and jobs. I haven't noticed a disparity there. They do have plenty of sexism within the organization, but it's more centered in the family structure and in the congregation structure.
Very well put. Yeah.
I I just want to go back to a little bit where you were talking about things coming from the top down. When my wife was a Mormon, the kind of the head honchos of Mormonism, this is a very small, the very small group of men, exclusively men who kind of make the decisions for everyone. What's the head structure, the very top of the structure in Jehovah's Witness like? Is it the same kind of thing, or is it a wider? Or
it's pretty much exactly the same. It's
right.
8 dudes. One of them happens to be black. They managed to get a little bit of diversity in there. I think he's just a token, just so that they can say they're not a bunch of white. They're not just a bunch of white dudes, but whatever. I mean, he still does as much harm as the rest of them in the stuff that he says, so it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But yeah, there's 8 old dudes living in New York who say that they're not directly inspired by God, but also they're trying to like be like, oh, well, we're not claiming that God speaks to us directly or anything, but also if you don't listen to us, you are defying God. So it's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're basically you want all of the power that comes with being godly inspired, but you deny the label, basically.
Yeah.
Because the label has to then be defended, right? So it's one less thing to have to defend.
Right.
Well,
they think that makes them look humble, I think. Like, no, we're not claiming to be, speaking for God.
But here's what we say, and it's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so that might be a form of like trying to humble yourself. But then when I think about it, that actually comes off to me as being more arrogant. To say it's not coming from God, but I understand and I know and listen to me,
It's like, well, if it isn't coming directly from God, why aren't my ideas as valid as yours?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
It's obviously coming from somewhere.
Yeah. One of the other things that you had talked about earlier, going back to the education thing, and I wanted to touch on it. I've just forgotten about it. Shoot. Like it just left my mind. But you were talking about the discouragement of education.
Higher education.
Yeah. Higher education. Yeah. And I had 2 points. I made one of them and I've forgotten the second one. So I'll just cut this part and we can come back to it. But
which you won't cut, by the way. This is turning into a running joke.
Well, so I know, right? What I have been doing is getting really distracted. And so I'd be like talking to someone or whatever while doing editing and then miss the cuts. But I'm back at it.
One of my favorite things when I'm listening to podcasts is when they say, we'll cut that out. And it's like, the fact that I'm hearing this means you didn't.
Right? Yeah. Oh, and that reminded me what it was. This is perfect. You had said something about the self-guilt. Like, you were taught to self-indoctrinate over and over and over again, which really reinforces belief versus somebody else's words. But then you said you'd be reading a book and you felt guilty yourself. Like you would self-reflect and have that sort of checks and balances like internally. And that was one thing, just to make it more of a conversation and less of an interrogation. That was one thing that I really felt a lot when I was religious, both as a Christian and as a Muslim, was guilt when I would do something wrong. And it was all internal self-guilt. Especially around, because this was the time of my life when I was raising young children and I was married. So a lot of the guilt was around not being a good wife, or not being a good enough mom, or godly enough mom, or not being submissive enough or quiet enough as a female. But I had the same thing, like if I was, I don't know, partaking in secular media, it was the same thing as, should I even be watching this? Should I be reading this? Is this going to challenge my faith? Is this going to corrupt my brain or make me make bad decisions? So it's interesting that you bring that up, that the propensity to put blame and shame on yourself versus it coming from an external thing, because you've been so convinced that whatever this belief is true.
Yeah. And it made it a lot easier. It's weird because, you know, I went through these cycles of guilt and shame, which was ultimately what drove me away. Was I'm a sinner all the time. I'm so tired of feeling guilty and miserable. At this point, I don't believe I can be a Jehovah's Witness accurately or properly. So if I'm going to die in Armageddon, I might as well spend the last couple of years of my life not attempting to be something that I clearly can't be and being constantly guilty. Like if I'm going to be guilty, at least let me like go fully into the things I'm going to be guilty for. Like let me just do those things all the way. Instead of like half-assing it in secret and then feeling bad about it and then being like, I'm never going to do that again, and then doing it again anyway. That was really kind of what drove me out.
That's super interesting, because I think that a lot of religious people in general experience that I'm going to sin privately and secretly anyway. I'm going to carry the guilt and shame. I'm going to continue to do it, but I'm going to continue to put on a front so that everybody else around me also doing these things thinks that they're the only one, because we're all putting on this front that we're not doing these sinful things.
It's so common in Jehovah's Witnesses that they actually have a term for it. It's called leading a double life. And what I didn't realize until I got out and talked to other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses is that we pretty much all have a double life. Like
you almost have to.
Pretty much every single Jehovah's Witness has a double life to a degree or another. Like, and it blew my mind because I would hear from people who were at the top ranks of the organization who had left and were like, yeah, I was getting gay sex at Bethel at the Jehovah's Witness headquarters. Like that was stuff that happened.
And that happens a lot in religious organizations across the board. Like there was just that, the guy that ran the college who was caught with like the partner exposed like the cuckolding that he was doing, where his wife was sleeping with another man and he was watching and stuff. None of that to me is immoral, right? Like, if you're,
it's like, sounds like everybody involved was having a good time.
Great. Everyone wanted it. They were all consenting adults. Totally fine. Nobody was gaining over another person. Great. But your doctrine has made you an immoral person. Your doctrine has taught you that it's wrong, and you're doing it anyway. That's what I find wrong with his actions, is the hypocrisy that he'll punish or hold others responsible and hold them to that higher standard and not hold himself. And like you said, I think it's so prevalent throughout religious organizations. And it shows that I think deep down inside, a lot of people don't actually believe that these things are wrong.
And the thing is, it's not like I consciously acknowledged that I didn't really think these things were wrong. At least it took me a while to do that. Like, you know, being a queer Jehovah's Witness child, like at some point kind of just being like, you know, I literally can't tell what's wrong with like me wanting to be with a woman or a guy or both at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, who is this?
Why is it wrong?
What is
immoral about that?
And I remember asking my dad about why homosexuality is wrong. And he gave me basically the lines about how men are supposed to submit to women in the family. So if you've got two men or two women, there's nobody in the relationship who is supposed to have the final say. And that makes for, you know, a disorganized, you know, whatever family. And it's like,
No bending of the concepts there, huh? Like no possible way that a woman, one of them could take the lead, or
yeah, and it's like in my own head, I've always been like, the organization isn't sexist. These rules aren't sexist. It's just that this is the way things are, you know, just naturally. But then when I get told, oh, well, the man has to have the final say, so it literally things literally cannot work between two men or two women because a man is supposed to have the final say. It's like, okay, I'm seeing where this is starting to sound just arbitrary now.
yeah.
Like, okay, like before I just accepted men are like this and women are like this, but when you're like, well, two men could not work because a man's supposed to have the final say, it's like, so what's the qualification here for
and who are you to say that? Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why can't it just be the person with the better idea, or they can compromise or something? Because aren't you supposed to compromise anyway as a couple, even if you're a man and a woman? Like that
it just didn't compute.
To be like, yeah, this is starting to not make sense.
Yeah. So we're bumping up against a commercial break. When we get back, I want to discuss like our coming out of religion experiences and when we let go of the actual belief in God. But I did want to address that super quickly because there was another one that I had heard that, well, it's because it wasn't how God designed us. And so we're going outside of God's design. He had designed a man to be with a woman, designed a woman to be with a man. And when we stray from that, we are straying from his path and his design. And even that didn't make sense to me because of you find homosexuality in nature, right?
And the male G-spot is inside
in the bottom. Yeah. So not only that, but there's a natural attraction with many people to either be fluid, like bi-curious, bisexual. There's such a range of sexualities. And if God designed us to be the way that we are, then he designed us with that broad range of sexualities. So yeah, that really never sat well with me or made any sense whatsoever. But yours, the Jehovah's Witness, it almost seems extra arbitrary, like even more mundane.
Yeah, I don't ask me why, because it never made sense to me either. And seeing my own parents' relationship, it was even more like, why does the hot-headed one get the final say in everything? The one who's working all day and then comes home to a family that's already been functioning as the four of us all day, and then he comes home and is like, what are you guys doing? These aren't the rules I've set up. And it's like, yeah, well, you're not here to enforce them, and we're all getting along fine. So
oh, that is so true. Okay, so off to commercial break. And when we get back, we will discuss our exits outside of religion.
Okay, so as Rudy is our honored guest, we're going to give the commercials to you. Just sell yourself. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you do. Tell us your platforms. Tell us how people can follow you, support you.
Oh dear. Oh boy. Oh me. Oh my. You can obviously subscribe to my YouTube channel, although I don't upload to it that regularly. I do on occasion do the live stream every now and then. And of course, I have a back catalog of, I think, great videos that you can watch there. You can watch me on Talk Heathen or Secular Sexuality. I've made quite a few appearances on The Nonprofits and a couple on Truth Wanted. Those are all great ACA shows you could definitely check out. I have an OnlyFans, which is struggling and needs support. So if you
go and like support them. Go and support them, everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, if you're not particularly into adult content, you can support me in other ways like Patreon, PayPal. I think I have a buy me a coffee link somewhere. It's all in my link tree, which I'm sure our lovely hosts will post up somewhere. So if you want to find me on any social media, find me on any of the videos that I've been in, or financially support me in any way, all the links will be in my link tree.
Wonderful. Thank you. Because we have no other Richard, I suppose it's down to me to advertise our wonderful Facebook discussion group, where you can come and talk to us, give us ideas, give us shit for the stuff we've said. If you don't agree with us, please
tell us why we're wrong, because I love correcting myself.
Yeah, we do. That's another thing we love to do, correct ourselves. If we make mistakes, we want you to point them out if we don't spot them ourselves. So yeah, go to the Facebook discussion group, follow us there. There's Linktree where you can get all the podcast platforms that we're on if you're not a big YouTuber and you don't want to see our pretty faces. And that's it. That's the end of the commercials for this week.
Welcome back from the commercial break. Before we left, we were discussing what our experiences were coming out of religion. And the reason I was thinking about that is that, Rudy, you had brought up that one of the reasons why you left, or the main reason why you left, is because it just kind of felt like you couldn't win, like you were always sinning over and over and over again. And what that says to me in my mind is, well, at that point, as you were deconverting, you still had a God belief. You were just rejecting maybe the doctrine or the teachings. And that was very similar to me. I think it was probably maybe like 2 years later that I ended up finally like, well, hold on. If I'm letting go of all this religious stuff, why am I hanging on to the God concept that I only know through all the religious stuff? Right. And they're so intricately tied together. Like, where is God separate from that stuff? And it took me a long time to put that together. So what was your experience? Did you have something similar? Or did you pretty much let go of God right away? Or where were you at with that?
I didn't let go of God right away. I had I've noticed very recently in therapy that I don't have a clear memory of the first like year or so after I got out of my religion. Like,
oh wow,
I don't have clear memories of that. Like, I know the main events that happened, I think, but every now and then my partner and I will be talking and he'll be like, "You remember that?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." He was like, "It was pretty early on when we were dating." I'm like, "I don't remember anything from that time period of my life." I finally like actually deconverted about 6 months after I moved out of my house, out of my parents' house, and I was 18 then, so basically still a child.
Yeah.
I had no life experience. I had lived with my parents my entire life up until that point. I was homeless for a brief period of time. During that time I was losing weight pretty quickly, and I was already skinny to begin with. And I was also struggling because I had left because I felt like I'd given up. And my life felt good, but I wasn't fully letting myself enjoy it because I kind of just had it in my mind that, like, yeah, you're having fun now, but your ass is doomed.
So did you still have that like fear of hell then, or fear of punishment?
Yeah, fear of being like shot with a flaming arrow or crushed by a giant fireball in the War of Armageddon.
Oh, Armageddon.
Yeah. So that's not a great thing to carry around with you, as you can imagine. And that didn't always traumatize me. Like, as a kid, that wasn't an active thought, was like, what if I die in Armageddon? Like, that wasn't really something that crossed my mind. But as I got older and as I was struggling to be a Jehovah's Witness, that thought, that image became increasingly threatening and traumatizing. And I started dating my partner, who I have now been with for like 3 or 4 years or something now. But I started dating him only a month after leaving. We moved in together almost immediately because I was homeless, and he was like, "Well, I'm not going to take you out on a date and then drop you off on a street corner." You know, like, so that's not going to happen. So yeah, so we had and so we're going from like not knowing each other very well to him comforting me when I'm up in the middle of the night bawling my eyes out because I'm wrong and I'm gonna die and you're gonna die too. And it was a bad time.
And now, from what I'm gathering, and I could be making an assumption here, but it sounds like he wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, or they weren't. I think you've used the word he. Yeah.
He was an atheist. when I first started dating him. He had been a
Okay.
Christian previously. He had already deconverted long before he met me,
Mhm.
and I was thankful to be with an atheist because I was still attached to that religion even though I wasn't following it. So I really
Right.
didn't want to be asked to join any other churches. I didn't want somebody trying to fill the spiritual hole in my heart because I had just resigned myself to leaving it empty.
Right.
And I really didn't need anybody telling me to go to a different church or something. So I was like, you're not going to put that pressure on me? Great. I don't need it.
That's
I
awesome.
think
I
the
think that
moral of this story is that everybody needs a partner like Rudy.
yeah.
He is amazing. I highly
It
recommend.
sounds amazing.
If I could clone him and hand him out to some of my best friends, I'd be like, you need one of these. Trust me.
Oh, I feel that
It's
way
a
about
great
my
product.
husband too. Yeah. I posted something similar on Facebook too, where it's like, if you bring joy to my husband's life and he brings joy to your life and all this other stuff, like I'm not gonna judge that you're friends or judge that he's a part of your life. Like, good on him, right? And so I love that, the attitude of like, this person's an awesome person. If I could give them to everybody, I would. Like,
Yeah, if everybody
just
could
love that.
have a Nathan, everybody should get one. Excellent model,
I
10
love
out of
it.
10, 5 stars, rave reviews, highly recommend. Yeah, he was definitely integral to me getting out because he listened even though he didn't understand because he came out of a much more normal version of Christianity.
Mhm.
He didn't have crippling trauma associated with the religion that he left. He did have some issues that he had kind of had to go over in his life, but it wasn't anything like what I was experiencing. He also wasn't trying to deconvert me, which
Mhm.
was pretty important because I would have considered that proselytizing just as much as anybody trying to get me to go to their church.
Or it could have
And he
been seen
never
as
did that.
threatening, right? Like,
Yeah.
here's my beliefs. I'm going through my process. And now you're telling me what to think. And that might cause a lot of confusion or stress. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's good that he withheld and just was there for support. What I kind of want to get in on a little bit there is that thought that, like, there's a lot of teachings in different religious communities that you need the religion to have the support and the love and the community and the people that are there for you. And the more and more that I'm exposed to the atheist community, and like my own, like my mother has been atheist the entire time I've been alive, and just knowing that there's so much love and support in the atheist community, but what is different is that lack of the attempt to indoctrinate or the attempt to get you to follow one certain belief system, and that can relieve a lot of pressure from like any relationship. Um, so I think that that's something that we should kind of sort of highlight and get out there as atheists, is like, hey, we are loving, caring, supportive people who will take in people off the streets. I've had a family come live with us for a little while because they were just in need, and they were out on the streets, and we've helped friends and family as well. And it's like, that is something that religious communities tend to, I guess, claim as being just their own, right? And so your story and like the stories that I could share of like the atheists in my life, I think we need to get those out there and really demonstrate that, like, hey, like, this love and support comes from anybody, and
Do you know
atheists
what
are
I
no
find really
exception.
interesting about that? Especially, but
Yeah.
I mean, I've probably got a different perspective being this side of the pond where we've got kind of Richard's ex-Christian light thing coming up, rather than the fundamental. Even the mainstream Christianity in America it tends to be more fundamental, but
Mhm.
it with the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, they're so big on saying this is your community, this is our community. You know, you need to be in this community, and
Mm-hmm.
then they just want to cut you off when you leave.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, you know, just kind of, you seem to be contradicting yourself, because we still need community, even though, you know, we had some good friends in the Mormon church.
Yeah.
And you know, just for them just to turn around and go from literally, you know, taking care of our children when my wife was in hospital, bringing us meals round, cooking us meals, to literally just being like, right, we don't want to speak to you ever again. It just seems bizarre when they push this line of community and
And
things.
care and
You'd
taking care
never
of
get
people.
that in the Church of England, by the
Yeah. And
way.
it leaves you wondering, like, were we ever friends?
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
would you still think of me as a friend now if it weren't for this religious thing, or were we just never actually friends to begin with? Like, what? Yeah, it makes you question everything. And I definitely experienced that. Jehovah's Witnesses have a pretty strict shunning policy. I haven't seen my siblings in a few years. I haven't seen my grandparents, aunts, uncles. When I initially left, I had an aunt and a cousin who were not active Jehovah's Witnesses, but since then they've become active Jehovah's Witnesses again and cut off contact with me. So it's bizarre. I've had limited contact with my parents, especially my mom. There was a time when my dad was really sick, and so they allowed me to come and visit, but they made sure that my siblings were out doing errands when I was there in the house. And at some point, my uncle came and stopped by the house, and my mom had to go downstairs and basically tell him to leave because I was there. Didn't get to see him.
Wow.
So even when my parents were bending the rules, they were still pretty. It was very, very conditional.
Like they would only bend so far.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that. I mean, I'm sure Laura's in exactly the same boat as a parent. How you could cut your child off for any kind of belief or anything. I don't think I hold anything so dear that I'd put it before my children.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all myself. Like I can't even fathom it. But like even in my own experience, so I left a Christian community and I left a Muslim community. And in neither cases was there any sort of doctrine about shaming or shunning or cutting people off. But even then, I had a similar experience to both of you, where it's like people just didn't care or didn't follow up or didn't, hey, how have you been? And then on top of that, yeah, like it's like those communities just disappeared to me. And I have maintained a couple of friends from the Muslim community, and even then, like over time, we've just drawn apart. And I think it's honestly because we don't have that catalyst anymore. That was like kind of like, or what's the word that I'm looking for? That was really like keeping us together. That was what we had in common, and then they just naturally. So even though there wasn't like a deliberate shunning, I still felt like the loss of a support group in a community and like people who I thought cared about me. And it's interesting because you don't realize how much you need it until it's gone. And so, yeah. So as an atheist, I've had to like deliberately go out and seek out communities. It's not like I can just show up at the church and be like, oh, these are the people that I'm surrounded by. So therefore they're my community. I have to be all deliberate.
You can't even do that really in the atheist community because I mean, unlike religion, the word atheist doesn't entail any views on life, any doctrine, any set of values even. So and that's something that I had to learn going from a highly tight-knit religious and family community, because all of my family on both sides of my family out to my grandparents are all Jehovah's Witnesses. So my family unit as well as my general sort of community was all tied to that, and then it was gone. And I felt like when I realized that there was an atheist community that I latched myself onto that, like all these people are great, and I started to build up these expectations in my head that that turned out to be unrealistic, but that's fair because this isn't a community should be made up of people who actually do share values and interests in common, and not just of people who are obligated to be nice to each other because of a label that they share.
Right.
It's funny as well because I'm a lifelong atheist. I've never been religious, and since I've been working with the ACA and volunteering for the ACA, I've got some real good friends through that organization.
Likewise.
Some like behind the scenes, some of the background on the social media side of it and the YouTube side of it. Other volunteers for that organization have become some of my best friends. And yeah, I didn't go into that thinking I'm looking for an atheist community, because I've always just been me and had that kind of lack of belief anyway. And it's Go
I was
on.
gonna say, so I have a question for you then. Like, prior to the ACA, and I think it was COVID that really like got a lot of us where it caught our attention and we started getting more involved. But prior to that, then, what were your social groups and what was your community like for yourself?
I pretty much. I mean, I've always been kind of, as you can tell, a reader. I don't really, I don't really socialize much
Books
with
over people.
Yeah, I ride a motorcycle, so I've got quite a few friends who are bikers, and we kind of went out and did, like meet and stuff for bikers. And believe it or not, I've got a lot of religious friends. So I've been to I regularly visit mosques and churches and stuff like that. So and but mainly, my social group was my immediate family, my wife and my kids, and my best friend, who's like literally the sister I never had. And that's like my close knit social group. I've not got really a wider circle of friends in real life. So the kind of coming into the ACA was that wider circle of friends for me that I guess normal people would have in their daily lives.
I don't know if it's normal per se, other than it's just common, especially in our culture, to like seek out these large groups and large organizations to be a part of. But I don't see anything wrong with having a close knit social group as long as you're happy and satisfied and not lacking anything or not needing resources or help or companionship. But so that leads me to a question that I have for Rudy is like, having left the Jehovah's Witness community prior to ACA, like, was there any gap where you just kind of felt like you did or didn't have a community, or what did you do for yourself or like need for yourself during that time?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a period of time where pretty much my partner was kind of one of like 2 or 3 friends, and my other friends were like my exes who I had just broken up with right before dating him. So that didn't turn out super great, as you can imagine, but I had a need of connection, and I had just lost so many major connections that I couldn't afford to lose any.
Yeah, I understand that.
And now I have friends who live in my town. I have friends who, when I go to the cafe or the bar, I just see them and I'm like, hey, how are you guys? And it's nice that I live in a small town now, too. Moving to a different place helped a lot because my family was very well connected in the city that I grew up in. So pretty much anywhere I went in a public place with lots of people, I would run into a Jehovah's Witness that used to know me and would pretend they did not make eye contact with me. So that didn't feel great. But now I live somewhere where all the people that I know now are people that I have met fully on my own. Some of them don't know my past. Some of them have met me because I just was a nice checkout person at Walmart. Or, hey, I saw you at the game store the other day and you were looking at this game. And it feels amazing to just make my own connections, even the ones that aren't tight knit. Even it's just like, oh, that person, I have I vaguely know that person. I know their name and I see them about town sometimes, and I can just stop and have a friendly conversation. Just being able to have connections of my own that I've made that way is like, oh, but there was definitely a period of time where I had 0 outside of my partner, and that was very lonely, but I think it was an improvement still from having friends that I couldn't be fully open with and I had to hide half of myself from, because it didn't feel real anyway. It felt there were some friends even that I felt more open with that to this day I wonder if we could ever be friends again. If they ever left the organization, because it's like I did have a genuine connection with these people. We did have common interests. We talked about way more than spiritual stuff. In fact, we almost never talked about spiritual stuff unless we were in a spiritual setting. We had all these other interests in common and all these other values in common. And those people still cut me off too. Even the people that I never questioned whether or not we had a genuine friendship. And yeah, it was hard not to have those connections. And I was not the kind of person that really thought they would ever make friends online. I have always felt kind of weird about that.
Mhm.
But now it's like, I'm an adult. I can travel and meet these people. Like
And you
it's
can
not,
have
they
Zoom
don't have to be
conversations and
right.
get
They
to
don't
know
have to be
people.
strangers on the internet. We can do
Yeah.
video chats together, and I have a group of friends that actually a couple of hours after this, I'm going to be playing a Dungeons and Dragons game with online.
Oh,
Two
so
of them live
cool.
in Canada. One of them lives
Yeah.
in Texas. One of them lives in Idaho. One of them just moved to New York.
Wow.
And I met all of these people online, and it's awesome.
I love that. You bring up a couple of really good points that like I really want to touch on. Like, but the first one that you just said, it really changes what we mean by community when we have like this online thing, huh? Because you really, really can like reach out to anyone, anywhere, and find people with different interests in common with you, or something like, even if it's a similar life experience or a similar condition or reality that you guys share somehow. There's so many different groups and communities and organizations online that it's kind of neat that we can be so connected even without being in the same space. But something you said made me really challenge the idea of community in general. Like, I still think community is good, but I think community is really defined by the individual. And you get these really toxic definitions of community when it's like what you said, where it's like, hey, this is our tight knit community. This is what we all believe. And once you leave, you're on the outside, and we're not really there to support you unless you're in it with us. It really kind of corrupts, in my opinion, like what community is and whether or not it's important. And it makes me question if religions in general overemphasize communities for the sole purpose of keeping people banded together within their own organization, not because that large of a community is good for a single individual, but because it's good for the organization, right? Because it seems like the two of you, and even myself right now, prior to COVID and getting more involved online, only having a few friends and family as your community seems to be a very healthy way to live life and to have that sort of balance. I don't know what your guys' thoughts
just
are on
having
that.
a handful of friends who lived in town with me, and I could call up every now and then. I have one friend who I hardly like. We live in the same town. We hardly ever talk, but every now and then we'll go on errands together, and it's like, you are my best errand friend. Like, I love just going on a grocery trip with you. It's
I love that. That's
I
so
remember
cool.
I don't know whether it was me or someone else who'd put a post on. This is going back a few months about having friends who you
Do a
can
grocery
just
shopping
go
with.
on errands with, and it's
Yes.
so funny because me and Zoe, my best mate, we go shopping on purpose. We'll like find excuses to go grocery shopping just to spend time together and have a laugh because we have so much fun doing it.
I love that. Yeah, we used to too. Like, I have actually a couple of different friends that we used to do that with. And I remember when we had our kids were babies, it was ridiculous. It was like two moms with the baby carriers, and we're buying diapers and all this food, and our carts are all full, and we're like, like navigating around people, but we have to stay within a vicinity of each other so we can talk. I mean, it was just chaos.
and so you're
when I'm
not
looking back on
completely
it.
blocking the aisles.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like all this, like, it was almost like mobilizing a little army, but it was nice because we weren't grocery shopping alone, and it wasn't a grueling task. It was a social event. So I think that's awesome.
One of the things that I feel like I've kind of learned recently on this topic of community is, like, I guess for me, I've started thinking less about the atheist community because I started to realize, like, I've met a lot of shitty atheists. Like, just at the end of the day, I've met a lot of shitty atheists. I think that I've met a lot of kind of cold-hearted skeptics. I think at the end of the day, the label that is the one that matters most to me as far as picking out friends is probably humanist. And it doesn't even have to be a word that you know and call yourself. It's just the way that you act. It's your values.
Behaviors and how you treat others.
I have Christian friends who are humanists. I have various pagan friends who are humanists, some that I've met online and some that I know in my day-to-day life. I just happen to meet them and they're like, yep, I'm into crystals, and I go to this monthly meeting with my other pagan friends. But also, oh my gosh, you ran out of depression meds? Here, I have some extra ones. Are you okay? Are you going to make it through this time? Like people who care about people. That's
yes.
those are the
You know
people
what?
I want to be around.
I think
don't
we're both
care
excited to hear
what
you say that, and probably for the same reason.
Yeah. And I'm probably going to speak for Laura. We did an episode on humanism, and both me and Laura said, we don't identify as humanists. And Richard was like, you so are humanists.
But you are humanists.
It was like he was applying the label to us, but it was not something we identified as ourselves. But all those things that you've just mentioned, those attributes, are all things we kind of aspire to and admire and look for in ourselves and each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and yeah, so that is what was so important about what Rudy said, because they said, not like, I don't care if you give yourself that label or not. I care about how you treat people and how you act. Right. And they had said, like, Christian friends who are humanists, pagan friends who are humanists. And that's what I think that we were getting at with Gil is, I don't want to attach too many different labels to myself if I don't fully understand what the repercussions are in terms of an organization, because there are humanist organizations, and I'm not currently members of them, and I don't want to represent them until I know what it is I'm representing, or I don't want them to represent me without me knowing what they represent. And I don't want to be limited by that. And so that was where my hesitation was, having labeled myself as Christian and labeled myself as Muslim. And you make a really good point there. Humanism is a religion or worldview, but it's also a philosophy. And if somebody is living that philosophy, definitionally, they might be a humanist, whether they label themselves or not. And I would agree that you could give me the label of humanist.
I'm just using the definition of like people who care about
people
and are trying to make the world better.
Who cares what they believe? Yeah. Absolutely.
And you could give any word for that as long as that's the meaning of the word. That's what I mean.
Yes, exactly. So I love that you made that that clarification without either one of us interjecting. You just made it.
Yeah, and it's amazing that when Rudy made that point, that me and Laura were just sat here smiling. It was because we understood exactly what you were saying, and it was so
we're on the
touched.
same page.
Yeah,
certainly are. Sorry, Laura, you look like we're going to say something then.
Well, we are coming up to the end of the show, so I'm going to let you make your last point, and then I'm going to, I know, and then I'm going to let you guys like kind of close out now, but I don't want to take away from your point, Jill. I was just going to say it's getting to be about that
I was just going to ask Rudy, and it's a good time to do it with it coming up to the end of the show. What do you think lies in store for the Jehovah's Witnesses in the future? Where can you kind of see the organization going? Can you see it failing and collapsing, do you think? Because they've kind of, during the pandemic, they've changed tacks. They've stopped going door to door. And like, I'm a mailman. That's what I do for a living. And trust me, the amount of letters we get from the Jehovah's Witnesses to our neighbor, and just unaddressed to our neighbor, they seem to have changed tact. How do you see them evolving, or do you see them evolving or just completely collapsing in the future?
First of all, I want to point out that Jehovah's Witnesses have always written letters. They just didn't do it that often. They would do that to reach people maybe in apartment complexes or things like that who they couldn't actually go up to the physical door. I also don't know if it's going to be permanent, them not going door to door. I'm glad that they've taken COVID precautions. I'm glad that I haven't had to hear about members of my family who are particularly vulnerable getting sick or seriously, medical complications. So I'm glad that they took that seriously. And I don't know if they will go back to preaching door to door, but it's so iconic to them that I can't imagine that they will stay with just writing letters.
Yeah, I was going to kind of agree with that. Not even knowing the Jehovah's Witnesses, so much has been interrupted because of COVID that we think life has changed. But once things settle down, and I know they've started to settle down and things have started to snap back into place, and then more waves have hit and we're kind of going back and forth. But eventually it's going to be business as usual.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've thought about what is the future for Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm really not sure. I know that a lot more people are quote unquote waking up with the internet making everything so publicly and obviously available, all that information that they really don't want you to know about how the organization's run, where it started. obvious sort of contradictions with the doctrine, things like that. But I don't know where it's gonna go. I wish I did. I wish I could prepare for it, to have rebuttals ready to go. But I honestly have no idea. And it's a little scary. But honestly, the more things go on, the more they seem to be shooting themselves in the foot a bit with things like the way that they've addressed child abuse within the organization, the way that they've addressed apostates, which is just people who've left, but they specifically use the apostate label to describe somebody who speaks out against the organization. We're getting louder, and they are too, but their numbers aren't growing and ours are.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's not
love
looking
that
super
answer.
good.
I love that answer, because so often we all have our opinions about what's going to happen, and honestly, there's just so many dynamics involved, and religions do tend to adapt, just like any other cultural phenomena, and they tend to adapt to survive. So yeah, you never know. So I love your answer. It's super honest.
Yeah.
But that brings us up to the end of the show. So I just wanted to thank you again, Rudy, for being on. That was really cool. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. And honestly,
thank you for having me.
Anytime. I think we just barely scratched the surface, because we talked a lot about our own experiences and community and stuff, and got a little off track from Jehovah's Witness. It would be nice to have you on again for some like more in-depth conversations, if you're up for it ever. Or even other topics too that I know that you're passionate about. I would love to have you back on.
Yeah, definitely. And from my perspective, I've been a fan of Rudy for quite a while. I reached out when I did a show on what subject was it? Because my mind's gone blank. I did a show and I reached out to Rudy because her video would fit perfectly with that show, and and I just love that the message that you're giving, Rudy. I love everything you do. I love seeing you on Talk Heathen. I love hearing your voice on Talk Heathen. It's just brilliant, and I'm so grateful that you are a voice in our community. Thank you for being on the show, and thank you.
I feel like my face is burning.
I love it. I love making people uncomfortable in good ways.
Do you know what? I must apologize as well. I must apologize, and I do this quite regularly, and I need to get better at it. I've just referred to you as she, and I apologize for that.
I caught that, but I didn't want to call you out on it.
No, call me out on it. I need to do better.
See, the thing is, I'm bad about it too, because most of the time I'm like, I won't correct them. I know they didn't do it on purpose, but at the same time, I know if I don't correct them,
it becomes
they're
a habit.
Keep doing it, even if they're not doing it on purpose.
So bad on both of us. Bad on Rudy, bad on me, and bad on you.
Shame on us all.
Yeah, definitely bad on me. It's something I need to get better at, because I do it on a regular basis with people, and I need to get better, and I know I need to get better, and I want to be called out on it. I want that to go in. I want it to become a habit, and I want it to be normalized.
Thank you so much for saying that, like, on air. That's awful big of you. I like that. So we've thanked Rudy, but I also want to thank our audience. Thank you guys for listening. If you guys have any questions, comments, corrections, if you guys remember which religion it was that like only follows the red letters, like the Jesus letters, please put it on the Facebook page, because now I'm curious. But yeah, I look forward to following up with everyone on Facebook and chit-chatting with you guys throughout the week. But in the meantime, I am Laura.
I'm Rudy.
And I'm Richard. You've been watching Skeptic Hangout. Until next time,
stay curious,
interrogate your beliefs, and stay skeptical.
Bye.
Bye.